Today we're diving into something really important, India's human rights commissions. You can think of them as the official watchdogs for our rights. So let me ask you a question. You've got these basic rights, right? The right to life, liberty, equality. But have you ever stopped to wonder, who's actually looking out for them? Who's got your back, officially? Well, that's exactly what we're going to get into.
Okay, so before we go any further, let's just make sure we're on the same page. When we say human rights, what are we actually talking about? These aren't just some lofty, abstract concepts. We're talking about the absolute basics, the freedoms everyone needs to live a decent, dignified life. Things like the right to life, liberty, and justice. They're pretty much the bedrock of a fair society. Now, it's one thing to have these rights written down on paper, but you need someone to make sure they're being followed, right? That's where these official watchdogs come in. India set up these institutions for one specific reason: to keep an eye on things, to investigate when rights are violated, and to stand up for people.
So where did this all come from? Well, there's a specific starting point. You got to go back to 1993. That's when the Protection of Human Rights Act was passed. This was a huge deal. It was the law that basically created the entire framework, the whole blueprint for these commissions.
All right, let's kick things off at the top of the food chain, the big one, the National Human Rights Commission, or as you'll often hear it called, the NHRC.
So the NHRC was set up on October 12, 1993, right after that act we just mentioned. You'll see some official-sounding terms to describe it. Autonomous statutory body just means it was created by an act of parliament and it's meant to be independent. And its role is quasi-judicial. Now that's a key one. It means it kind of acts like a court. It can investigate and make judgments, but, and this is a big but, it doesn't have the power to enforce its own decisions. We're definitely going to circle back to what that means in the real world.
Okay, so for a body with this much responsibility, you'd expect some pretty serious people to be running the show, right? So who exactly is leading this national watchdog?
Well, take a look at the lineup. The person in charge, the chairperson, has to be a former Chief Justice or a judge of the Supreme Court. I mean, you can't get much higher than that in the legal world. Then you have other top judges and 3 experts in the field. But here's a really smart part of the design. The heads of other big commissions, like the National Commission for Women, for Minorities, and so on, are automatically members. This brings a ton of different perspectives right to the table.
And how do they get these jobs? It's a pretty high-level process. The President of India makes the appointment, but only after getting a recommendation from a special committee. And get this, that committee is headed by the Prime Minister. It also includes the Speaker of the Lok Sabha, the Home Minister, and even the leaders of the opposition from both houses. The whole point of this setup is to get buy-in from all sides and try to keep politics out of it as much as possible, protecting the Commission's independence.
So that's the big picture at the national level. But, most human rights issues don't happen in the abstract. They happen on the ground, in a specific town, a specific village. And that's why there's another layer, the State Human Rights Commissions, the SHRCs.
The thinking here is pretty brilliant in its simplicity. Just mirror the national watchdog system, but do it in every state. It's not just about adding more offices. It's about bringing this protection way closer to home for ordinary people. It makes the whole system more accessible, more local.
So what's the real difference between the national and the state commissions? Well, it mainly boils down to jurisdiction. The NHRC looks at the whole country, dealing with big national-level cases. The SHRCs, they stick to what's happening just inside their own state. And, as you'd probably guess, this also means the NHRC generally has more resources, more staff, and a bigger megaphone when it comes to influencing the national government.
Okay, so we've got these commissions, these watchdogs. But what can they actually do? This is maybe the most important question of all. It's time for a little reality check. Let's look at what they can do versus what they can't.
This slide really gets to the heart of it. Let's break it down. On one hand, their powers are pretty significant. They can launch their own investigations, they can walk into any jail to see what the conditions are like, and they can recommend that victims get compensation. Pretty powerful stuff. But, and this is a huge but, look at the other side. They can't give legally binding orders. They can't force anyone to follow their recommendations. They're often described as having teeth, but they can't bite. They're not a court, and they're not the police.
And this quote just nails it. Their recommendations aren't binding, but they act as a strong moral authority. Think of it like this. They can't arrest anyone, but they can put a massive spotlight on a problem. They can name and shame. And that public pressure, that can be an incredibly powerful tool to get governments to act. So you might be thinking, okay, If they can't force anyone to do anything, what's the point? Do they even matter? And the answer is absolutely yes. Let's talk about why they are so crucial.
It's because they do all of this. They're on the front lines protecting our civil liberties. They're one of the few bodies that can really hold powerful groups like the police accountable. They're like a bridge, a link between a regular person with a complaint and the massive machinery of the state. And by digging into tough, local issues, they push for real change, which ultimately makes our democracy stronger.
And let's not forget where it all started. 1993. That's over 30 years ago. For 3 decades, these commissions have been in the background, fighting these battles and pushing for accountability.
So that brings us to the big final question. We've established that these watchdogs are a powerful moral authority, but I want to leave you with this to think about. In today's world, with all the challenges we face, is being a moral authority enough? Is it enough to truly protect our most basic, most fundamental rights? Something to chew on.